everyone. Welcome to the Incubator Podcast. This is your co-host, Abir Sran.
And I'm Darren Boyd. And today we're going to be talking to Nikhil Gupta, who's the CEO and co-founder of ArmorCode. ArmorCode makes a AppSecOps platform, which is really the intersection of application security posture management, unified vulnerability management, continuous compliance, DevSecOps orchestration. A big domain, a big space. But Nikhil he's done this before, and he's an author and he's a cloud security specialist. We're excited to have him on the show, and hopefully we'll get into a lot of the details on why this is such a pivotal set of foundational elements to an AppSec program. So welcome, Nikhil. Thank you for joining us. And maybe we can start, Nikhil, with you giving a little bit of your background, and then we'll tee off the conversation from there.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. You guys are doing a phenomenal job of, doing the education. So really appreciate it. And, quick background about myself, call me crazy. I started ArmorCode in the middle of the COVID, exactly 2 years ago in July of 2020, when the world was saying, oh shit, COVID happened. I'm like, oh shit, COVID happened, because as an entrepreneur, that's what you want to do is, you look at it as an opportunity and a calamity. So prior to finding ArmorCode, I was founder and CEO of AppSecOps, which was a leader in cloud security posture management, which was acquired by Sophos. And then before that, I was with VMware, Forescout, Ericsson, Bell Labs, and all, like 25 years. I'm much older than I look, I guess. And, all this recent success that I've gotten here is after 25 years of failure. So, happy to share my journey here with you guys.
That's amazing, Nikhil. Thanks again. And wow, you're truly a serial entrepreneur and bring that wealth of experience here to ArmorCode. So, Nikhil, if you wouldn't mind explaining to our audience, what is the core problem that ArmorCode was set out to solve for, and what does that evolve to? A little bit of that background would help set the context.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's always important to understand why and how I came up with an idea as an entrepreneur, right? What's the problem? So basically, when my last company was acquired, right? And of course, Sophos is a market leader in security, and they were integrating our product. They were like, okay, let's run SonarQube on your code base. And they came up with 3,000 issues or some ridiculous large number now that I don't remember. And they were like, okay, the code is, needs to be fixed and all those things. And I'm like, I went to my engineering team. I'm like, I thought we wrote much more secure software. And they said, yeah, absolutely it was. So what happened was, all my engineering team for three weeks basically sifted through all those findings to find out of, whatever that 2 or 3 findings were worth fixing. And that problem was kind of bothering me. And so, when I decided and I left Sophos, as an entrepreneur, I'm like, okay, digital transformation is happening. World is getting more and more software is coming out, with COVID, everything is kind of being rewritten. And this is the, a hacker's paradise, if you will. Like whenever there's a calamity, hackers want to go after you. And I'm like, okay, this is a perfect intersection of, having digital transformation and, security being the importance. So that became the genesis of, ArmorCode, where basically we want to, at the ultimate level, we want to simplify software security. Now you may call it as application security, product security, DevSecOps, or whatever, if you use software bill of materials. But at the end of the day, underlying problem is that software needs to be more secure. I started my career 20 plus years ago at Bell Labs. I was fortunate to work with father of Unix and some of those great guys. And back then we used to just have once a year release, if you will. And, we barely used any open source, and we used to have the monolithic architecture, 3-tier architecture, right? And there was no notion of cloud, if you will. And fast forward 20 years, right? We have a hourly release or maybe every second release, depending upon who you talk to. And, 70 to 80% of the code is open source, and there is no monolithic application anymore. It's all microservices based architecture, and most of the organization becoming cloud native, if you will. So while the application development has transformed, and also the infrastructure, right? From Bell Labs days, the server used to sit under my office lab table, if you will, right? So from here, it's everything under cloud and infrastructure as a code. Even the infrastructure has evolved. So like both infrastructure and application has been evolving, but application security vulnerability management has not evolved in last 20 plus years. And that became the main point, because for securing one application, you need over a dozen tools: SCSS, DAS, RASP, ISD, Pentesting, bug bounty, fuzzy logic, and you name it, right? So that's one thing. The second thing here is there's a lot of silos, right? So you mentioned earlier, like, we have these tools, like we have a SCA tool, SAS, DAS, all those tools are there. And, there's for one application security engineer, on an average, there is 100 developers, maybe more, right? And we are working with the number one hotel chain in the world, number one entertainment in the company, number one big four, right? So we are having a lot of large to medium-sized customers. And what we are finding out here is that there are all these silos. The output of those things don't talk to each other, right? And the third thing becomes is because of all these things happening, there's like you have a developer, you have a security, and then you have operations. And the incentives, all the threes are oppositely aligned, right? Developers' incentive is to get it out yesterday. Security is to make secure, and for ops, it has to be robust. So as a result, what's happening here is people are living in a what you call it as an Excel hell. So for example, like in 2020 December, we had SolarWinds come in. December 2021, Log4j came in, and people are waiting not if what will come this year, because hackers have found out that okay, that's the time when people are relaxing is the best time to tell the or reveal the vulnerabilities. Now in those scenarios, typically what happens here is like, for example, we had Log4j. First thing you would do is you'll get all your run a software component analysis, and then it says, okay, we have all these findings. Then the next thing is you want to create a tickets, right? And then you'll create the tickets. And then the third thing is like, okay, you go to the developer, because the AppSec engineer who's 1 to 100 overpowered doesn't know where the code lies. And then engineering has to quote unquote solve the problem. Now, how do you do that? Typically, it will take you 2 to 3 months to get this information together. And this is where we feel that there needs to be a layer of orchestration, automation, or what we call it as a governance and guardrails, if you will, where basically all the things can sucked in and they orchestrate that. So that's the problem we are trying to solve here, is that siloed organization, overwhelming number of vulnerabilities not being triaged in time, and with increased zero-day attacks happening, how do you sift through all this noise?
Yeah, and for sure, Nikhil, with all of that, you've definitely got a problem on your hands, or clients definitely have a problem, and hopefully, ArmorCode, as we unpack it, really sets itself apart in helping resolve that pain. Since there was a lot to unpack here, maybe I could start, or you know what, Darren, I'll let you speak. All right, it seems like you're eager beaver here.
Well, because so much was said there, and I actually want to get to all of it. So hopefully we can. But one of the places I want to start is what you're describing is helping someone actually come up with a practical way of managing a security program, and I think it's just so fundamental. But if we start with the idea that software security is inherently a very intricate process built on a lot of triggers, a lot of chronological sequencing. Sometimes it's brittle, sometimes it's very complicated, sometimes it doesn't necessarily your we'll call it the pipeline for this activity doesn't necessarily evolve alongside the architectures. It's time consuming and it's really detail oriented. Now your platform comes along and it offers a lot of mechanisms to make that process much more available. It promotes culture and code. So can you walk us through a little bit of how, when we put in this AppSecOps platform, what can folks typically respond to? What do they start to see in terms of actionable insights? And do I have to rely on all these complex triggers, or can ArmorCode kind of come in various stages, I suppose, to help me start to stitch together a better story? Can you walk us through that a little bit first, and then we'll get into some of the other areas?
No, absolutely. And I'll just take a step back and I want to share one thing, right? So you guys have a lot of experience building security programs and all. And historically, the way things have been done is, let's say you have to start a security program. First thing is like, oh, I want to pick a tool A, B, and C, right? Then you'll say, okay, I want to work around a process. And then you'll say, okay, I need a team of XYZ number to build that program, right? What we have found out after talking and working with 500 plus customers is that it's upside down, because at the end of the day, what happens is whenever a breach happens, the board and the CEO comes and says, hey, is inker8.com is kind of safe or not. They are not asking whether it's your container or whether it is your virtual machine, which is safe or not. So everything is kind of now converging into application, because that is what you're looking at from. Now, then the second thing that happens is, like, if you're looking at any of the medium to large companies, they have hundreds or thousands of applications and microservices. Now, you will never be able to fix 100% of those. But what you want to do is you want to identify which is my tier one application, tier two, tier three application. Now, for tier one application, you may have a higher SLA that I want to take care of a critical issue in 4 hours versus for a test application, which is tier three, I don't care even if it is 4 weeks or not. Now, what happens here when we look at all the zero-day attack and sifting through that, basically engineering went and looked at all of the applications and all the codes and repositories, and then you come up with a large list of things that should happen. But guess what's happening here is you don't have a good understanding of priority one, priority two, priority three. So this is where, where ArmorCode comes into place, where basically when you start, we help you discover the applications which are out there, help them classify which one is tier one, tier two, tier three. Then the second thing is the service level agreement, because based on that, you want to ensure that if it is tier one, then, it should go to, ZB's team and blah, 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 whatever the follow-up or the process is there. And in the end, you want to look at what is a tool that I need to look at, right? Because example, if you are in a C++ shop, right? And again, with all due respect, like we are vendor agnostic, I'm going to share some names here. But let's say if you're looking at C++ tool, then Grammar Tech may be better. And if you're using Java, SNCC may be better, or something else will be better, right? Because the needs is different. And in any organization, there are different business units, there are different products, and the languages are also different. So today, because of the microservices-based architecture, one program may have part of it is Golang, another could be C, another could be Java. So one microservice is in C language and all. Now, as a result, you need 3 separate tools to get that. But from the governance perspective, does it change the way you respond? No, because you need to fix it because it's your tier one application, whether it's in C, C++, or in a Go language. Now, Go language, there is no good SE or a SaaS tool. You may want to go into open source, right? So that is where a platform like ArmorCode comes in, because once you have the governance layer therein, then you will say, okay, what is my SLAs? And then you will say for my application one, microservice one, I want these tools. And for application 2, microservice 3, I want these tools. And then whole orchestration and automation, all of these things kind of come together. Now, Gartner is calling this as application security orchestration. That's part of it. And, we were recently selected as a part of the hype cycle over there. Now, as I said earlier, like, application security, product security, these are all, like you can use as synonyms over there. It all boils down to software security.
Yeah, if I can just throw a follow-up to that too, one of the challenges, or one of the many challenges, is applications are obviously very dynamic, as is the size and shape of the vulnerabilities, as is the scope of the application. So what you're saying is it makes a ton of sense, because prioritization at the end of the day is how we're going to get through some of this. We don't get to punt on some of the problems. And to your point, there hasn't been significant advancements in vulnerability management for the last X number of years. So does ArmorCode allow us to dynamically adjust to the changing size scopes, especially scopes? It can be various security scopes that are changing over time. Does it allow us to shift and adjust to the variability that tends to go along with applications? Is that something that's automated? Is that something that you give control back to the practitioners to be able to influence? What does that look like to stay kind of in tune with the applications and what they mean to an organization?
Yeah, so again, a very good question. So what happens here is that, you start with the governance and the policies to begin with, but it's a very dynamic environment. And what ArmorCode does here is we have a no-code automation capabilities over here where you can create your runbooks. So like a lot of these problems, what we are solving in the software has been solved at the infrastructure level, because you used to have tools like SOAR, security orchestration and automation remediation, right? So there was no SOAR in the application security space. Now, talking to the customer, one need they had was application security posture management. I want to see what my security posture looks like. Second thing is the same thing is I want to tie it together with universal vulnerability management, because I need to make sure I have vulnerabilities because I'm seeing it as the same. And then the third thing is the automation. So where we give the power to the AppSec or the vulnerability management engineer or a manager, where they can run a run book. Because in a scenario X at log4j, the pressure may be more and you may want to run things faster, right? Whereas like for other vulnerabilities, which are like coming as US certs and things like that, which not be as critical, then you can have less. So again, we believe in basically giving the power in the hands of the people who are managing the program. And we give all the knobs here. So you could go back. It's like, hey, I need to turn one notch up because this is a priority one for me. I'm going for a SOC 2 compliance, or my largest customer is coming in. And then for other lower priority, you can turn the knob down.
Yeah. Nikhil, just further kind of continuing down this theme. So most organizations, yes, need this assistance. Let's call it the orchestration as you're talking about it. And then with that, the classification. So at a first order that they might be able to classify their types of applications, tier 1, tier 2, 3, et cetera. And then based on potentially an incident like Log4j, it has certain degrees of prioritization. But assuming that there's no breach type of event, and in the day-to-day running of an AppSec program, how do organizations start to deal with the plethora of vulnerabilities and start to manage or classify those vulnerabilities for priorities and, if you will, orchestrate that into saying, okay, I got this context. This is a tier 1 application. So there's degrees of maybe runbooks as you've talked about it. So there's policies, there's kind of prioritization put in, and then you have this plethora of vulnerabilities that are popping up. How does the engineers supporting this application, or the developers, what have you, all figure out, given the criticality, I need to exercise these top vulnerabilities first? Otherwise, they tend to just ignore a lot of that, regardless.
Yeah, actually, if I may pile onto that, because that one's the one we see the most, which is we're all looking for a harmonizing effect. Where how can we build and establish something that is more cohesive? Because to Sabir's point, if you give me just a myriad of vulnerabilities, the first thing I'm going to do as a developer, I'm going to come back to you and say, great, prove it, right? Like, I need proof. Is this actually, if I string these together, is there an attack chain here? And then they put the burden back on the security practitioner. So how does ArmorCode start to promote that harmonizing effect where we can give something a little more specific and a developer can actually prioritize and action it versus having this back and forth that tends to surface?
Yeah, so you guys brought up a very good point, right? And this is where I call it as, developer and security people playing ping pong here and put the ball on the other court. Now, what happens here is that, so typically, and again, I have a distinguished pleasure of being a developer, security, and an ops guy. And that's the reason I kind of decided to solve this challenge up here. So as a developer, I didn't care about security at all, right? No matter what people say, right? Because I am incentivized to deliver software fast, right? And I don't know what is cross-site scripting versus SQL injections and things like that. So now whatever happens here is, in the typical developer mentality is, anytime you send them something, because the security vulnerability, they look at as a bug, and developers hate bugs, right? So first thing is they'll say it's not a bug, right? And then they will push it back. That's their nature, right? And the reason why, ArmorCode, we are getting the success that we are getting is because we understand that. And again, repeating the point that it's a people problem versus a technology problem. So first things first, what we have done here is we have created the platform such that, our initial users, and quote unquote, its initial user is the security team who needs to have the governance layer, right? And we totally understand that developer wants to live in their own world of Jira, ServiceNow, ticketing, Slack, right? So number one thing is they don't want, like I have heard numerous times when you have using Vera code and all that, so like I'm overwhelmed with all these, check marks or whatever the tools are there, the interfaces, right? Developers like a different set of tools over there. So in the companies that I had talked to earlier, they were, giving those access, and that itself was a pushback. So first things first is we kept the interface. We have a very strong bidirectional integration into Jira, Slacks, and all those things, so that the security guys goes and updates. We have an entire triaging process, which is very simple, so that developers don't have to interact into the security tools, if you will, right? Now, with that said, that enables and fosters collaboration. Second thing here is the security team basically goes through the problem, they sift it, and they may realize that, this problem was already solved at web access firewall. Because, again, and I'm going to advocate for both of them, right? Because there's nobody's at fault here. So as a security guy, you are also not here to just overwhelm the developers, if you will, with a whole bunch of problem. You will look at it, you will say, okay, it's a skill injection, but this is covered at a WAF because we have covered XYZ port. Then as a result, I don't want to raise it as critical because it's not exploitable. Now the security guy in our platform comes in, does all the analysis, and they can easily reduce because the tool doesn't have the context. So whether it's Qualiscan or anything else, they know that this is critical or high or medium, right? Now, what we enable the security team is to put that context, and then you can change the severity from critical to low. Now, the moment you are being more considerate and empathetic with developer, because now, yes, as a process, you still create a ticket, but it is not like a critical issue which needs to be fixed in 4 hours. It is like a low which can be fixed in a year. You're already making friends, right? So that is how you start. And the second aspect here is then, so they go into the platform, they update it, automatically Jira and the Slack gets updated there. Now, when the developer sees those issues, they are like, oh, okay, you know what? I don't understand that. Now they're communicating in their ways and then they push it back. So that is where collaboration plays a very important role. Then the other aspect what we have built is we have created what we call it as a knowledge base. Because as a developer, what happens here is, hey, I need help. If you tell me exactly what needs to fix, I can fix it in 30 minutes. But a lot of time when I get a security issue, I have no idea, number one, what is SQL injection, what it is. And I go back to AppSec engineer. AppSec engineer is catering to 100 developers. He or she doesn't have time to answer that. Now the developer goes back and is like, I'm tired. They will go to the internet, they will look at the website. Nowadays, 70% of the Java code is already written free somewhere there, or you can cut and paste. You will, in order to do it faster, you will cut and paste it. Now what happens is when you're having several releases a day, that Java code, who knows, it's out in open source, may have their own vulnerabilities. Some bad guys may have injected certain things. So now developers with their intention to do it fast, they put it into the code, it goes into the scans. Now scans are not inline, and instead of fixing an issue, you may be injecting other issue. So that is the ping pong that happens here. And this is what we kind of facilitate and orchestrate and automate here is that, okay, how do they better interact? Now, the moment, as I said, you're giving the right priorities, you gain developer respect. Then we have added, like we have, in fact, it's very interesting and a good important day for us. We just processed our 100 millionth finding in our platform. Okay. So we, yeah. So again, for company, that's a big landmark. So you can imagine the amount of data and all we have. Like, as a startup, when we started, I wouldn't want to use the AI/ML snake oil, if you will. Now that we have data, we have patterns to learn. So now what happens is when a security guy comes in and say, you know what, this particular issue, I work with developer, is kind of quote unquote not an issue in my environment because it's not exploitable, right? What our system does is does a machine learning and all, and we have several patterns going on where automatically not this issue. These are the 500 issues which are very similar, and we go and suppress that. So imagine 30 minutes, which takes you for triaging. 30 times 500 is 1500 minutes or 15,000 minutes you're saving for security. Now security guys can go and sift through that much faster. And with the keeping the right severity, now instead of creating those 15,000 tickets, like literally I've worked with customers who have million findings in their Jira, and they have two separate Jira. One is just for parking these tickets. Right now, by reducing this 15,000 tickets here and having the right severity, now you are best friends or a good friends with, and you are starting in a different foot. Then the other thing is the knowledge base, right? So what happens is that first time when you fix it, you educate and you're collaborating. Now the developer goes and like, oh, okay, let's work it out. We fix it. Then we create a knowledge base. It's a targeted knowledge base. Next time when an issue happens, the intelligence tells you, oh, there is an existing issue like this. Have you looked at it?
Yeah.
And in that, we actually go to the details. So what we are seeing here is our belief and our vision was the reason why we believe we could solve this problem better than anybody else was by empathizing with the developer and making their life easier.
Yeah. That's phenomenal, Nikhil. Thank you for that very in-depth explanation, and that's tremendously helpful because, again, everyone's struggling with context. But more importantly, what you said at the beginning was you're solving for the people dynamic. At the end of the day, DevSecOps, DevOps, all of these things is a people problem. And more than not, there's a plethora of tools that everyone throws at it. But this is phenomenal that you're really focused on focusing on solving for the people equation through this platform that ArmorCode has created. So that's tremendously powerful. So the last thing that you mentioned here was the knowledge base that's existed, and you have this that is built up now over time, and you've gotten this experience and everything like that. So is this all organic, intrinsic to ArmorCode? Are you drawing upon other external sources to also support this kind of context addition to for the developer?
So that's a good question, right? So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So when we started, what we did was we went with, all the existing knowledge base and all, and we created and we basically curated a bunch of that. Now the platform has, so let's say if you are a customer, so you will get ArmorCode knowledge base, but on top of that, you can create your own knowledge base because which is very relevant to your particular organization. And an individual can create a knowledge base for their individual use case. So it's again a very elaborate fashion over there where we encourage, because we are working with customers of 84 business units, right? They have 15,000 developers. Now what happens here is what you are having a learning in one particular business unit, you would want others to benefit from it. And this is where, to your point earlier, when you're building a security program, you're looking at the umbrella level. You're not looking at a small team level. And that is the way you need to do it, right? Like you will say, okay, I'm a company XYZ, right? And at that level, these are my best practices. And it's not going to change much between business unit versus business unit two, because these are my corporate policies. And that's why I'm calling it a governance and a guardrail. Now you have that with knowledge base, you can share it across business units. So you are like, we have customers, right? And they are seeing ROIs in millions of dollars. Like, of course, their programs are much bigger, even smaller customers. So we have customers who have 100 developers and one AppSec engineer to 15,000, right? That's the spectrum. And what is happening here, this is where the automation and intelligence and all those things are kind of helping it together.
Yeah, actually, and that, so I love that response, and I love the focus on the enterprise. When I think true excellence in any domain comes with it comes from mastering a specific problem with great focus, and we can see where you're doing just that. But can you expand on, because I didn't even think of that, the degree with which you're solving these problems for large organizations. I like how you even explained how the knowledge base can be tailored to an organization of particular size. Can you walk us through, because the underpinnings of this happening, of this whole layer working, is having solid integrations. You have many. In 2 years, I'm floored at how many integrations. And to your point, those are a lot of best in breed tooling, but they don't have the right context. You're putting all this together. Is there a particular strategy around these integrations, where you're focusing, how you're getting folks to lean in and partner with you on these integrations? Where do you go next with some of these integrations? What does that all look like? Because I really like your view on how you're making this work for an enterprise of size. So is there anything you can share with that?
Absolutely. And like, so what you're seeing in, short span of 2 years of success, that what we have achieved with top brands and everything else, but it came with 25 years of experience. I did orchestration at VMware and Cisco in my past life. And the hardcore lessons and the learnings that I had, we implemented over here, right? So now typically takes organization 1 to 3 months to do an integration. For one of our partners, we did 5 integrations in 2 days. And so we have built a lot of IP around that, right? And the way we did was we normalized, dedupe, and correlate. So for any integrations, we have a category, right? And for each category, we have a normalized database or architecture data structure. And then, so for example, let's say we do software component analysis tool 1, and then we do tool 2, 90 to 95% things are the same. So as a result, once we have a category in of SCA, then adding that tools in that category is like blip, right? In fact, I always laugh here is because sometimes it takes us 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get a MNDA and the partnership with the tool vendor, and it takes just 2 days to do that things, right? And now what's happening is, and there's a separate discussion altogether where I see the industry moving, because people need to worry. And it's not only security. You look at any technology, any tool, it's all orchestration these days. It's all about integration. So we have put a lot of IP, to your point, to simplify to that level. And then once that is there, then our dedupe logic is separate than our correlate logic. So now we are reaching at a point where we can have an intern who can come and take the customer's API or the tool's API and just map it, click and so that is how simple it is. And then what we are doing here is we are adding categories by categories, and we are very customer focused. So we started with application security, we started with SCSS, DAS, all those tools which is there. Then customer told us, like, to be very honest, like 2 years ago, if you had asked me, oh Nikhil, are you going to be doing vulnerability management? I said hell no. I was like, only AppSec. But now customer told, like, I want cloud security posture management, and we are integrating with all the cloud security posture management vendors, because the thing, again, what's happening is, even from application perspective, for example, right? Let's say you get a critical issue from log4j, and the software security, application security runs like head over heels to fix it. But now if the underlying infrastructure has a rootkit problem, all bets are off. Now, what happens is, this is where a lot of confusion and frustration happens, because AppSec team will come back and say, oh, you know what? I had my team work over the weekend to fix this. By the way, you haven't upgraded this rootkit problem, right? Because it's still exploitable at the end of the day, right? So that is where then we said, okay, infrastructure needs to be correlated together. So we started partnering with, Palo Altos of the world to integrate that. Now, so again, we are again very customer focused. Very recently, we are going to make a big announcement at Black Hat next week, where customer came and said, you know what? One of the dimensions of application is also APIs. I'm like, okay, because we are in the orchestration world, it's like, okay, we are using such and such application security tool. So we are ingesting that. So again, we are not kind of bound by that. The architecture is such that we can add new kind of quote unquote categories. And each time you add those categories, it can actually become more richer, because it's all about context, right? So like down the road, guess what? If we have a SQL injection and we could parse, and this is not something we are doing tomorrow, but if our customer comes back, we will be seriously looking at it. But today, when we say this is an issue, then you have to go and look at firewall rules and say, okay, oh, firewall is secure here. These are people are doing manually. You don't need to do that. We can parse the firewall logs and also do the correlation, right? So the idea here is, like, we have the deep set of tools, right? Like, we started with customers having 4 tools. They have 30, 40 tools integrated into our platform to get a better contextual information. And at the end of the workflow remains the same. Like, so there will be a workflow, what you call it as, so you have infrastructure workflow, you will have app workflow, and there will be synergies over there. So we are playing in the governance layer. We are ingesting from various categories, and sky's the limit here.
Yeah. Phenomenal, Nikhil. I think you answered my next question, but I guess the theme has been around context. And so I love this, that ArmorCode is establishing context for all the folks involved here, from all parts, from the developer side to the operation side and security personnel. So that context comes in from the cloud security posture management, adding all of this stuff. We talked about the knowledge base and everything like that. So this is context around the platform. Now, as a firm, you are also maintaining context for the application security community at large. I understand that you have an instrumental role with the Purple Book community. Can you expand upon that and how that serves to either aid in product development or give back to the community? What's the genesis, and where's that all headed?
Yeah, no, thanks. So again, I'm a serial entrepreneur, right? So again, this time when I was starting the company, I was looking for the broader good, right? And I strongly believe in giving back. And as I was looking into the problem statement, and I found out that because it was a people problem in my mind more than technology, and I interviewed over 200 plus security leaders to find out. And one common thing which was very interesting, that they found that there was no good community around for application or product security in general. Yes, there are certain communities, OAS, which is there, but it's more from the tooling perspective. But we are talking about leaders and all. RSAs and black hats are really good, but they are focused on generic security. So that is where, like, being an entrepreneur, I said, like, let's take the bull by the horn. And we started a community. We call it as a Purple Book community. And what we thought was, like, will be a small initiative, and let's talk to people. And now it has grown to 200 plus security leaders in just a year and a half, right? and we actually wrote first volume of our Purple Book of Security, which is on why application security, and it's basically it's an open source book, right? It's a free book which you go down to www.thepurplebook.club, right? And the book is forwarded by none other than Phil Venables, who's the global CISO of Google, as well as ex CISO of Goldman Sachs. So people from very high caliber, right? You have leaders from S&P Global, from Fidelity, and Facebook. So people from all these various aspects of the community have gone together to give back and created this community. Now, with this community, we meet twice a month, right? Now we are starting multiple chapters, including in New York, Seattle, Chicago, and Texas, right? So again, since you guys have a big fan following and you have a lot of reach, I would like to encourage people to reach out to me or my community manager over here, and let's get together, give it back, and it's a community of security people by security people. Just to give you an example, so when Log4j happened, basically people were scrambling. Like, you can go to, there are gardeners of the world. There are a lot of institutes, if you will, which are deep set of knowledge. But especially like when you have zero-day attacks or things like that, all of a sudden everybody's fumbling, right? And there are people looking into fintech and healthcare and other things. So the community got back together instantaneously, and we had a session. And these sessions are internal. So in order to benefit from that, because this is a trust in between here, so you have to be part of the community, and community is basically an invite-only community, right? So again, want to give a heads up here because there are people of different calibers over here, right? So we want to make sure that we are kind of keeping that standard over here. Like we have over 2,000 applicants, but we only have 200 members. We just signed up our 200th member just yesterday, right? So what we do here is at that time, the members came in together. We don't record those sessions in, and they shared, like one of the largest fintech company, they shared their success on how they were able to, get rid of Log4j in just 2 weeks versus, and then we are doing cross-pollinating, having that discussions, right? We also have a Mighty Network, which is like a new application, or LinkedIn from software security leaders in Purple Book, where they can exchange notes and all, right? And then we also have a broader session. So let's say a lot of people are interested in giving back, like you guys. In fact, you should also be tied together to Purple Book in the resources for the podcast, because you're generating fantastic content. So we partner with organizations like you who are giving back to the community. Put the links over there so people have some initiatives. There are a couple of people, Teja and Yash from Splunk and Xtwilio. They have mentorship program, right? So we got them hooked into the Purple Book. So the idea over here is to give back, connect it together, and if you want to hold a session, right? So you can have a session, you can have a podcast and things like that, or if you want to do a blog. So again, it's a very big community, and that community is a separate endeavor than ArmorCode, right? Of course. So the whole idea over here is giving back, because I personally believe as much big inspiration and aspirations I have for ArmorCode, we want to be the world's largest software security company. But again, there is no single company ever has solved a bigger problem. So the problem is much bigger than all of us over here together. We are here together fighting against the bad guys, just like you are playing your part of educating people. We are building a part of platform, and Purple Book community is playing a part of bringing the people together. And our ultimate end goal is to fight the bad guys.
Yeah, that's an incredible pursuit in general, and it's a passion that we share as well. Like we're staunch supporters of knowledge sharing, of global asymmetric inclusion of people and ideas and thoughts. So really appreciate that, and we're getting more and more involved with that community, and so very excited about that.
Yeah, I would love to host someone from there, from the Purple Book, as well as maybe even do an event here down in SoCal. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. Now we'd be remiss if we didn't focus on a two-parter here, and it's a take on it's really an expansion of one, but it's around that how one does somebody interact with ArmorCode. What does that journey look like, just in general? And then the follow-up to that is, how do people really get started in this space? Now, we're avid believers that a platform such as ArmorCode is foundational to getting started, because we are typically defect obsessed, and we know what that does. We know the friction that's a part of that focus. So one, how do I even engage? And then two, what are the journeys, the typical journeys that a customer can go through or does go through historically with your go-to-market? Because that I think will be the most helpful for next steps for our listeners.
Absolutely. So again, as I mentioned, customer with 100 developers to 15,000 developers, can benefit from the platform. Me as a founder vision is one-to-one. One person developer in future when they're writing a code should be secure code, and Fortune 1 needs that, right? So that is the larger mission that I have, is that everybody on the planet should make a secure software development, and hopefully with ArmorCode. Now, having said that, that people on both the sides benefit. So, and I'll give you an example of both. So let's say if you are a small or medium-sized company with 100 or 500 developers with maybe one or two AppSec engineers, you may not even have a number one good understanding of what the landscape looks like of the various tools which are there. You may not even have a budget, right? And a lot of times people are reactionary, where what they would do is like, oh, log4j or XYZ happen and I'll get a SCA tool and things like that. People fail to understand that there is a lot of good work, and this is why we partner with OWASP, and global chairman of OWASP, Vandana, is part of Purple Book community. So there is a lot of education. There is a lot of good tools which are out there. So basically, if you have to start a program, it's again not tool, a process, and people. It's people, process, and technology. So if you are like, okay, 100 developer company, and you are like an engineering VP who's looking to make it a secure, you can benefit from ArmorCode. And I'll tell you in a minute like how you can engage with us. But then you can come in, you can build your policies, right? You can discover your applications, and then you can say, okay, I don't have budget. Let me use this open source tool A, B, and C. And you get that started. And as you graduate, and you'll say, okay, now I am from my 0 or maybe 5% security posture, I got to 70%. Now, a lot of startups, or almost all startups, are here to make money. So they need to go after their customers, and their customers slowly over the period of time will say, okay, what is your security posture looks like? So as a result, at that time, then they can graduate from an open source tool to a paid tools. But then while doing that, they don't have to reinvent the wheel, create the policies and everything else. That's all in place. Because what you do is you unplug the open source tool, plug in the things, you're getting the same reports, same analysis, and same guardrails. So that is where, it's very powerful for a small, medium-sized companies to get in there and start benefiting. Because I got this question numerous times where people are like, oh, we are not big enough. We have only 2 tools. I'm like, that is exactly when the time when you want to get engaged with ArmorCode, because you're not creating the mess. And I'll share use case of 15,000 people company here in a minute here, is where you want to avoid that mess, because all the companies, Uber or any company, they were very small at some day, right? You all start someday, you grow fast, and before you realize, you have accumulated so much tech debt at the end of the day, right? So you want to prevent that. So again, from here we have mid-sized companies, right? And some of them are, referenceable customers. So I'll share with them. Shippo is there, Shutterfly is there, Guardant Health is there, Snap Finance, SnapDocs. So SnapDocs leader, right, if you will, he used to be one of the early AppSec engineer at Amazon, and he had like all the power and the money and everything. When you are at Amazon, right, you have multiple years to build a platform. You have the smartest of the smartest engineer to secure it. But guess what? When that leader came out of the comfort zone on Amazon, where you could afford to build on all these things, and he joined a mid-sized company called SnapDocs, which is essentially process a lot of mortgage, very sensitive data. But he didn't have time and millions of dollars to build a platform. So, again, they have like maybe 300, 500 developers, something like that. He came to ArmorCode. He had some tools. Now, a lot of times, another thing which is very happening, there is a lot of old generation tools which are getting replaced with the new generation tools, right? So like there are tools which have been there out for 10 years, 15 years, and there are next generation tools which are just coming new, right? So in that particular case, one of the challenge for you, if you're going to a mid-sized company, is I need to upgrade my tech stack or tool stack, right? Now, how do you do that? So ArmorCode comes in, you have your old tool, you're getting your visibility, and then you can say, okay, you know what, I can just put in the new tool because my governance layer stays the same. But whether I'm using tool X versus Y, yes, because tool Y is cheaper because every technology over the period of time becomes cheaper, better, faster, and it is also having less noise. But at the same time, my tier one application, my SLA is not going to change. So my governance is going to increase. Then fast forward, one of my biggest success story we closed is one of the largest entertainment company down south in your neighborhood, right? Now what happened was they reached out to us through website, right? So it was a web inquiry that came in. So that is what I'm saying is that best way to reach out is go to armorcode.com, fill in the form for a demo request and all. We have our teams who will look at you. We cater to both 100 people to 15,000 employees, and then basically what happens is depending upon your organization size, then we'll have a we have a POV, proof of value, which you can see in 3 hours, right? Without having to send any sensitive information to us and all. We have sample sandbox. It's a SaaS multi-tenant solution. It comes in there. You can see a proof of value within 3 hours, right? Where you see, this is my use case. And now if you need, then you can go to a POC, which could be a week or two, right? Depending on the organization, larger organization. I know you guys deal with larger organization all the time. They may have a month or 2 months POC or maybe 3, but that's the whole process is there. And then, it's a platform is fairly simple. We also have a huge partner base, and thanks for being our partner, right? We'll encourage partners like you or reach out to you guys because see, at the end of the day, we are solution centric, right? While I believe 99% customers can benefit from ArmorCode, right? There are customers who may or may not be able to benefit. So that's why go to partners like you who understand the overall solution and say, okay, this will solve the problem than the other thing. So again, we have several ways to reach out to us, right? Right from getting on the website inquiry is the easiest thing, reach out to partners like you, or we have other big 4 partners or large global system integrators is there. And depending upon the comfort size, so we love to deal with you directly, right? But at the same time, based on where you are, which region you are, we'd love to partner with a partner. Typically, this works for larger an organization, and a lot of companies are working. Hey, we want to work directly, So we want to solve customers' problem in any fashion that we can.
This has been an absolute pleasure, Nikhil, having you. I think we could keep on going. This is a great space to dive and dig into. Hopefully we pick it up again with the Purple Book community and others in your team. And thank you again for being on the show. It was an absolute pleasure. Look forward to working with you and your team.
Absolutely. Thanks for having. And, I'll be happy to come back on your show. And maybe what we could do is, if you're okay, it's all remote, we could always have like a couple of Purple Bookers and we can have a session like this. So I'd love to do that.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nikhil.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.